Welcome back to the glue. God loving you. The magic sauce with your coach, Steve Bacon.
And my brother, the professor of possibility, P.O.P.
Holding it down. Holding it down.
Welcome to Self Mastery Sunday, family. You brought up something this morning that I was like, we have to do an episode on that.
Yeah, you did.
But before we get into that, how's it going with the project for Jacob?
If you're not familiar, I'm working on a documentary about my late son Jacob Sketchy Thureson, and there's three story arcs or pillars to the project. One is to carry on his legacy, release unreleased music, and tell his story. Two is to change the narrative around mental health and encourage friends and family to lean into the uncomfortable and the difficult conversations. And thirdly is to remove moral judgment, stigma, guilt, and shame around the subject of substance abuse.
Okay. Before you go past that,
Okay.
can you break each one of those down?
Sure. Well, I think telling Jacob's story is important. He was a signed hip-hop artist with Atlantic Records, and he had a global audience, a global following. And what was really interesting to me, and here's a big part of why I want to continue to further his legacy, is that as he was creating his music and as he was starting to ascend through the SoundCloud environment and that community and getting signed and that whole thing, and as he was growing in the music that he was making, and as he started to create lyrical content, now we provided a very, in our opinion, healthy spiritual environment, and it was very principle based, a lot of values that we stitched together in the environment of our home.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the content and subject matter of the things that he was writing and creating, talking about drugs or talking about girls or talking about, these types of things in maybe not the healthiest ways, in our opinion.
Mm.
And let me make that distinction. And I remember having a conversation with him about it, and it was like, hey, and it was one song in particular, and it was one lyric in particular that really hit me, and it was where he says, Choppa goes stupid like a retard. I'm like, you can't say that. I'm like, you can't say that.
That's not fun.
And
oh man.
So for him, he's taking creative liberties, and I was like, okay, and there's an artistic side of it. I get it. And, you're getting attention. It shocks people out of maybe their state that they're in. But what I come to realize after his passing, and I'm listening to these, like, different person after person after person that's reached out, these different fans of his, saying how much his music meant to them, and in many cases saved their life.
How can, hold on, because this is good. How can something so provocative save somebody's life? Because I've heard this in other realms of hip hop, because there's different sides to the arguments of hip hop.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Where one person goes, this is the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yep.
And the other one goes, this album saved my life.
100%.
Like Marshall Mathers.
Yeah.
Eminem used to get that a lot. It's
Mac
crazy.
Miller, XXX.
So how does something with disturbing lyrics save somebody's life,
Yeah.
in your opinion?
It's interesting too. So I've had this experience. Jacob passes. His audience is reaching out to us and sharing about the impact that he had on their life and the different songs that they resonated with because of the struggles they were having.
Mm-hmm.
And then they felt that they weren't alone, and they felt that somebody could understood them. And because they didn't feel alone, they felt seen and heard through the music. That's essentially what gives them hope and inspiration to carry on and push through. Mm. And so I've done a lot of research in this space and pulled a lot of the different comps, comparative documentaries, and the same thing is occurring with these other artists that are doing the similar type of music. Young Lean, Lil Xans, Juice WRLD. The content of a lot of the lyrical content on the surface looks like they're propagating this kind of behavior. But really what's going on is that they're expressing in a way the struggles that they're wrestling with artistically, musically. And that's their way of their own personal process and therapy. In turn, it's serving a whole generation of kids and people that are wrestling with similar things.
That's an interesting take, brother, I got to say.
It was a massive paradigm shift for me. Coming from this very principled moral high ground, which I've since kind of deconstructed and reconstructed numerous times as I've been going through these different paradigm shifts. So to stay on track with your question of kind of unpacking those different things. So that's one. Jacob's legacy, releasing more of the music, because now I'm required to steward the music.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like faced with, oh, well, do I just release it how he created it, or do I edit it to match my belief system?
Man.
Well, my belief system has shifted, and I've had these experiences, and I'm watching like, oh, there's a deeper layer to it that I wasn't aware of or I wasn't open to.
Mm.
And so that's a big component of it. And no, we're not making any edits to it. It's being professionally mixed and mastered by people that Jacob would have worked with or has worked with, honoring what he created and letting it be what it is. And then the mental health thing. Jacob was diagnosed with mental health issues, clinically depression and anxiety, and the medically supervised treatments that he was getting wasn't working.
Mm.
And so he took matters into his own hands, as any all-knowing teenager would.
Right.
And here we are. So the substance abuse, I think a lot of times there's the moral judgment is probably one of the biggest obstacles that for the people that are struggling to get the support and help that they need from friends and family is the obstacle of moral judgment. They get morally judged because they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or they're controlled by some substance. They're not taking proactive action or control over it. And so what happens is they get alienated and they isolate further.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone knows that has looked at the statistics after what happened during COVID and all the isolation that was going on globally with that. And if you look at the correlation between that and the numbers of issues with mental health and suicide, it's skyrocketed. and I don't even think we fully become aware of, is the epidemic issue that it is. So helping to encourage people to lean into that, and then provide parents and friends and loved ones with the resources that we've come across, that we've vetted and we've seen that are having a great deal of success.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it's not conventional. And we just want people to be aware that there are other things that are available to them that they might not be aware of that's having some success, if they're also in that same space of the place that the things that they are doing isn't working.
Mm.
And that's also true of substance abuse as well. So we're trying to steward the phrase that God's given me to, that is the overarching why, is stewarding my suffering well. And
What does that mean?
in the process of being in the ICU for 2 weeks, I prayed the first day we got there. We're like, oh, this is bad. Like, we didn't know. He was in a hospital in Hollywood, and we're here in Arizona. And so when we got word that morning, the doctors wouldn't give us a full scope of what was happening. But when they said we should probably come, then it was like, oh, this is serious.
Mm.
Because he had been in the not ICU, but he had been in ER before and different things. And so we weren't sure, like, oh, is this another one of those kind of episodes, or is this a different scenario? This is a different scenario. And I prayed a very simple prayer. Day one. So this was a Thursday afternoon, June 27th, or June 13th, 2019. And that Friday morning, I prayed this. I said, God, you know what I want. I want him to walk out of the hospital, right? He was in a coma. He wasn't responsive. And I said, however, if you taking him now is going to have a greater impact, like for the greater good, then so be it.
Mm.
And that was it. Very short, I didn't have, not a lot of words. I didn't need to, like, God knows. We didn't have to have some long drawn out conversation. And then we went through the things that we went through. And if Judy wrote a book called Beautiful Tragedy, and a lot of the details from her point of view and how she processed that is amazing. And if you get a chance to read it, it's a very potent yet heartfelt and practical book on walking through different kinds of tragic events and grief.
Mm.
The next day, Saturday comes, I pray the same thing. Very simple. God, you know what I want. But if it's for the greater good that you take him now, then so be it. Third day, which was Sunday, which happened to be Father's Day.
That's wild.
Of all days.
That's wild.
I prayed the same thing. Now, the first 2 days, when I got up from that prayer, I was still holding on. I was absolutely holding on to the outcome of what I wanted. I was not surrendered. I was not at peace. I was like, we're going to do everything we can do to help him do what he needs to do so that we can walk out of this place. Or roll out, whatever. Third day, I prayed the same thing. But that day was different. I had this vision of, like, everything was black, and it was this black stage, and there wasn't really any definition of anything. It was just like black space. and there was a single beam of light, like a spotlight, that was coming from like the top left down to the right. And it was much like a stage spotlight, so it was kind of fanning out as it came down. And in the light was this gold dust. And it was this gold dust that was just kind of floating in the beam of the light. And then it faded out. And that was the vision. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't assign any meaning to it. It was just a very vivid picture, and it was this really interesting vision in that moment. And I got up, and in that moment, I was overcome with a peace that transcends all understanding. Meaning that given the circumstances that we're in, I should not be feeling peace at this moment.
100%.
And I actually was able to surrender the outcome. I was able to realize that I had no impact. There's nothing I could do to change it or to make it better or to fix it or any of that. I had no control over that situation. And I was actually able to, instead of holding on to that outcome, was to surrender that outcome. So I had this peace that...
that though, because I know we've touched on this before, and it's still like as many times as I hear this story, the level of self-mastery, what this podcast is all about, that it takes. It almost reminds me of when Jesus spent that last couple of hours right before he was crucified, like, God, really? Like, like that? For real?
In the garden, yeah.
Like, there's no other way? No other way?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was resolved.
Well, then let thine will be done.
Right, yeah.
That's what this story reminds me of.
Yeah.
Every time you tell it, I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Yeah.
Like, that is profound, especially as a father.
Yeah.
To just, okay, like, there's somebody listening to this right now that either has gone through that and has not processed it that well, currently going through that and is not processing it well, or are about to go through it and would like to know how to process it. Can you just, I mean, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but just let God, open your mouth and let God fill it, because you're about to save a lot of lives right now.
No pressure.
No pressure. But there's a lot of broken hearts that you're about to mend right now, past, present, and future.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I want people to walk away from this with is it's not about me. It isn't about me. And in that moment, it wasn't about me. It was about, we had talked earlier.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second, right?
All right.
But it's my son. Yeah. It's my daughter.
Yeah.
It's my mom. It's my dad. It's my brother.
Yeah.
So what do you mean it's not about me?
Here's another distinction about that. That person also is God's son or daughter. And like you mentioned in that other podcast, that the Creator loves greater than we can love. So the question then becomes, do we think that we love them more than He does?
Ooh. But you're talking about a degree of self-awareness to right? Because again, that's what this whole show is about.
It took meditation. It took prayer. It took me pushing, right? I had to get resolved. And you mentioned something else about surrender,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'd love to dive into the surrender component of that, because I wasn't surrendered, and I recognized that. I recognized I was holding on to an outcome, right? I'm attached to a certain result, and I was not surrendered to whatever the possibility was.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, because of my experience and the things that I've gone through and all of that and all the work that I've done up to that point, I knew that I didn't have control over this situation. I knew that there was nothing that I could do to change the outcome. And so I had the awareness to surrender to whatever the outcome was. And that was keeping me from being present in the moment. I was experiencing the moment in real time, and I was there taking it in, but in my heart I was anticipating a certain thing.
Mm.
So I'm trying to hold on to a known future. And I had to let go. I had to surrender and be present in the moment, because there were people that were there, including Jacob, even though he was unresponsive and in a coma. I believed even the moment when we walked in that he could hear us and that he could feel us, even though he couldn't communicate with us in the normal forms of communication because of the condition that he was in. But if I wasn't present, then I'm not going to connect with him. I'm not going to engage with him. I'm not going to be talking to him like as if, like, I would show up and I was talking to him. I was sharing things. We're playing music with him, and I was telling him who was in the room and who was coming to see him, and like I was able to do that because I was present.
Mm.
And that set a certain atmosphere for people stepping into a very uncomfortable and dismal and disparaging circumstance or environment. I was only able to do that because I pushed to get surrendered.
I want to read something because I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at you while you're telling this story, and I'm gonna pull up I'm gonna share something about healing, or I want to ask you something about healing.
Okay.
But I got this sent to me. I want to read something that I got from a friend of ours, Esther Alley.
Oh, cool.
About the surrender process. So it's incredible that we're having this conversation right now. But it says, The Surrender Process by Mary Boney, MD. Surrender is a complex state of consciousness that really takes time to comprehend. The ability to access and achieve surrender starts with awareness. This is what's happening. Acceptance. Yes, meaning we're not in denial. We're not in victim mode. We're not putting our head in the sand. Yes, this is happening to me or someone else. Surrender is not passive at all. It's a constant blow by blow, minute by minute, micro shifts in your state of consciousness and your mindset and your ability to respond. It is not static. Your willingness to be present, it has to do with presence. Sitting with it, I am here. The willingness to let go of the need to know, the need to control, the need to know exactly what it is, the willingness to let go of the need to be right, the willingness to be a witness to your experience that's happening at the moment, and the willingness to navigate the unknown. It's about self-forgiveness. Let go of the self-criticism. Forgive yourself for all the negative things you say to yourself. I am a loser. I can't do anything right. I am worthless. Even if some of that is true, forgive yourself completely and totally.
Yep.
Then you will reach a state where the field of potentiality opens up to you. Because when you surrender, you open up potential. You're not attached to anything anymore. You're not attached to the outcome.
Yep.
If we're attached, that's not attention. If we're not
it's a good thing we can edit.
Right.
We can cut.
If we're not attached, right.
I want the knife. Please.
Don't edit this out. If we're attached, that's not potential. Our imagination is shut down. So when you reach the state of surrender, everything is possible.
Yeah.
So because I'm watching you share this story, and not a single tear is being shed.
Oh, I can do that. You
I
want
know
me to do
you
that?
can. No.
I can do that.
Because I've watched you tell this story over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I always teach that when something is healed, you could tell the story without the tears.
Mm-hmm.
Have you reached a point of healing with this situation? And if so, how? And if not, what's holding you back?
Yeah, those are all great questions. You ask good questions.
You know, I pride myself on that. What did it say? The quality of life is only dependent by the quality of questions you ask.
Well, there's another funny distinction about that too. When people ask dumb questions that are like obvious questions, and it's a way to have personal entertainment and just look at them and go, "You ask good questions."
So are you saying that was a dumb question?
No, these are good. These are actually good questions.
Okay,
I'm just giving you the inside scoop on some very subtle yet entertaining trolling.
Listen, I understand that you are a person of determination.
Yeah.
So I accept and appreciate your
we're coming off the
determinedness. Inside joke, please.
Yeah. The short answer to your healed question is yes. I was healed in a moment.
In a moment.
In the moment.
In the moment.
And when I was able to surrender is when I was able to be healed.
Okay. Somebody is getting a blessing right now. I'm listen. I got good. Somebody right now is about to move past the grief of a lost loved one right now.
Yeah.
How? Okay.
Now let me
you healed in the moment.
Yeah. Let me
because
let me
of your willingness to. So please do.
Let me unpack that a little bit because it doesn't mean I'm not without sadness.
Okay. So this is so good. This is so good.
Yes, I'm healed, and yes, I still have sadness that Jacob isn't here.
How do you know it's not coping? Because I teach the difference between coping and healing.
Sure. The difference is because I can continue to show up and serve and do so joyfully in the face of with having the existing sadness. That doesn't mean I don't miss him.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that there aren't moments where I'll hear a song, or I'll think about him, or something will remind me of him, and all of a sudden now I'm crying. That doesn't mean that I'm not healed. The fact that I'm crying or not isn't the indicator of whether or not I'm healed or not. I think the indicator of whether or not I'm healed or not is the peace that I mentioned earlier, the peace that transcends all understanding. Right? There's the experience of peace in and of itself. When I'm at peace, I can be at peace knowing that his physical being isn't here with me anymore. I can't physically give him a hug anymore. And I can go to his the cemetery where his physical body is buried, and I can have a full-on meltdown there, but I can still be at peace in all of those circumstances. And I think that's where that's the indicator of healing. The other component of that is that transcends all understanding, right? The understanding is that there is grief and loss and tragedy, and how can it doesn't make logical human sense, like human wisdom, it just doesn't compute. The data doesn't add up. There's no reason logically that I should be in a state of peace. However, that state of peace doesn't come from logic. Mm-hmm. It doesn't come from a formula. It doesn't come from some algorithm. That's a component that is a gift from God himself, from the Spirit that helps to overcome whatever the thing is, right? In this case, the thing was my son's life hanging in the balance. Once I was surrendered, I was healed. And that was that moment when I got up. And let me tell you what transpired after I got up that morning. I was able to be present. I was able to serve and encourage and have a sense of gratitude and thanks for all the support medical staff. One of the main primary care nurses that was on Jacob's case, while we were there, her name was Jasmine, and we became, you go through something like that with people, you become close. Mm-hmm. And she said, in all her years in being in the ICU, she has never, and she's seen thousands of cases, has never seen anything like what had transpired in this case. We didn't, because what happens? Hurt people. Mm-hmm. Right? People are hurting because their loved one is, their life is at risk, and in many cases they're not making it. And so if I'm hurting emotionally, my human tendency is going to be to lash out at the people that are around. And who takes it the most is the medical staff.
Right.
That was an interesting observation I was able to make because I was able to be present. And I could visually see the different staff that had compassion fatigue. Like people go into the medical industry for two reasons. One, they want to help people, and two, it's a lucrative career path where they can make a lot of money. Those are the primary two reasons why people go into those careers. And a lot of the nursing staff, it's usually the former, because they have a heart to serve and help people in that way. And I noticed a lot of them are very cold. They're very calloused. They've gone through a whole series of PTSD on their own of seeing all this death and this tragedy, and they're working diligently to try to save people's lives. And then many of them have seen more death than people in war.
Right.
And I wouldn't have been able to see that if I didn't get to a place of surrender. I wouldn't have been able to be present enough to see how other people were responding. I was able to sit across the bed. Jacob's in the hospital bed, and I was able to sit across from him watching people create their own narratives as to why we were here in real time, because I was able to be present. The awareness that I was aware of that was something that I had never experienced before. There was something that had transpired in letting go of that outcome that was otherworldly.
Right.
It was something else. But what I'll say about that is this: is to get healed. I think it's important to know what that means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that the sadness and the loss goes away.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to piggyback to that because I had a question and statement. The word that comes up to me is acceptance, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When it comes to surrendering, it's about accepting that what's happening is happening. Right?
Yeah.
Like the thing said, it's not burying your head in the sand, it's just accepting what's right in front of you. Right? But also your wife, Judy, helped me understand something about the loss of my mom, right? And this is why, for those of you that are listening right now, if you get a chance, just grab the book, Beautiful Tragedy, right? Amazing, amazing book by an amazing author and an amazing woman. And she said that the main part about grief is just unexpressed love.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
undelivered communication of an emotional nature.
Yeah.
I think is how she puts it.
Because I was at my mom's funeral and people were like, how are you this okay? And I was like, I accept it.
Yeah.
That she's gone.
Yeah.
Like at some point I'm going to get to that level of acceptance.
Yeah.
It could be 2 weeks, 3 years, 10 years, 30 years on my deathbed. Right. At some point I'll hopefully get to this level of acceptance. So let me borrow my future self today and just accept it now.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you a question in this distinction of sadness and healed, because yes, when you're no longer triggered by something, you are healed. And yet there's still the sadness, right?
Yeah.
So help me with that distinction of I'm healed from my mother's, because this happens to me, but I want you to,
Yeah.
I'm healed from my mother's passing, right?
Yeah.
But then I still get those moments where a song comes on, right? And then these tears flow. Yeah. What is that? If I'm healed, what is that?
That's you being human. That's you sitting. The sadness is the grief that there's emotions that you're experiencing that you can't communicate in this form. And I think we can communicate them in another way, except most people don't know that, or most people haven't experienced that, or most people aren't aware of that. We can communicate those. And I think that the sadness is grieving the loss of this experience with that person.
The longing?
It could be the longing. It could be the idea and what is no longer possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I will never sit and watch my son get married.
Right.
I'll never get to have the experience of his children. And so it's also grieving the things that are now not possible.
Right. But that doesn't mean you aren't.
It doesn't mean I'm not healed.
Right.
I'll never forget. And there's two different people specifically. After this occurred, after I had this peace that transcended all understanding and I was surrendered, I was able to be present. Now, there was 100+ people that had come through the hospital in that 2 weeks that we were there. And they would come in the lobby. People were bringing us food and drinks because we're there almost 24/7. We're not going out to go. And we finally got to a place where we would leave because we needed the reprieve of getting out of the hospital and out of that environment for periods of time, and recognize pretty quickly that, we do need to get rest. We do need to eat, right? We still need to feed our physical bodies. And in the face of that, but we also need to be present. And being present is also being aware of what else is going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's other families that are sitting in this lobby that are also going through a tremendous amount of grief as their loved one is in one of these other rooms. There were 20 rooms in that ICU. Jacob's one of 20.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being able to give and pray with these other families, share our drinks and the snack, because they didn't have people doing that. The 3-4 people that were there were there for their loved one. They didn't have.
So in the midst
people
of your
coming.
grief, you're still serving.
We're giving.
And giving.
We're giving. I'll never forget. So there's 2 people that this particular thing occurred. And this friend of mine I hadn't seen in 15 years. Him and his wife come around the corner walking into the lobby of the hospital. And I see him and I smile because I hadn't seen him in a long time. And the fact that he was there supporting us and that he took time out of, to come and be in an uncomfortable environment. Right? Who wants to go to the hospital? Not me.
Right.
That's not a fun environment unless, of course, you're going for a birth. Then it's a different situation. And I'll never forget the complexed look on his face when he saw me, because I was smiling. He was so confused and couldn't get his mind around the fact that how is it that my son is on life support in the other room and I can smile. That was not his expectation of what my condition was.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like anybody's expectation.
When he walked in.
Right.
And I'll never, vividly, the expression on his face is impressed on my being. I will never forget that. And the same thing also occurred during the funeral. Obviously, the emotion of the loss was very high, and as people were coming in, there was one couple in particular, Manny and Terry, and they came in, and I was smiling at them because they made the commitment and the sacrifice to be there. And Terry, the wife, the look on her face was the same as that as my friend Ade. Just utter, like perplexed that how could I be smiling in that environment? And I don't know what stories that they created in that moment. It doesn't matter to me, and it's none of my business. But from my perspective, because I was able to surrender and be present, I could still be happy that someone was there. I could still express joy in otherwise. Remember that piece that I talked about? It transcends all understanding.
Right.
People, let me say that again. It transcends all understanding.
So if you're sitting here going, but I don't understand.
Exactly. There's no formula. There's no book. There's no nut.
It goes back to.
It's beyond understanding.
It goes back to our last episode when we're talking about we can't understand God's long term, right?
Or like the depth of His love.
The depth of His love is beyond our understanding.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, 100%. But getting back to the healing part, right? How did I know that I was healed? I knew I was healed when I got up from that prayer in that moment because I knew God was present. And God spoke to me and He said, "Steward your suffering well." Now, in the midst of that, I didn't understand. Like, I kind of had an idea, but I didn't really understand what that meant in its entirety. Now I get to choose what that means for me. Right? Just like we're having a conversation and you're communicating things to me, I'm making choices in real time of what that means based on my experience, based on my understanding of language, based on my my vocabulary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But underneath that, I'm making a decision of what that means. I'm creating what that means in real time, and I'm responding to that. And the healing came from knowing that God was there, and He said, "Steward your suffering well." And so what I decided that meant was that I need to not be afraid to lean back into the hurt and the pain and the loss and share that over and over and over and over again, as difficult as it might be, as painful as it might be, with tears and with service, so that someone else can be supported, someone else can be seen, someone else can be helped.
What was the scripture you brought up about suffering?
2 Corinthians 3 talks about the idea of, and it's not worded exactly this way, but the principle of
we make up our own shit.
Is that we suffer so that when others suffer, we can meet their needs.
Right. I got a really hard question for you. Have you found purpose in Jacob's passing?
Yeah, 100%.
Can you talk to that?
100%. Like, I don't think I would be passionate about serving and helping people that are struggling with mental health or substance abuse had we not gone through this situation. So I don't know what my found purpose would be beyond that. And that's many people's experience. If you look at a lot of these foundations that are created, and when people go through something challenging like this, they'll have one of two responses. They'll lean into it and activate a purpose on really serving other people, or they'll completely withdraw. That's usually, in most cases, the two responses to this kind of tragedy and loss. And we get to choose. That's a choice. I could sit at home, curled up in a ball, eating ice cream, sucking my thumb, and doing nothing, and no one is going to say a thing about it because of what we've gone through. Matter of fact, many people expect that.
Mm-hmm.
But who does that serve? Who does that help? It doesn't help me.
So there's a really high level of consciousness when I'm with my clients or we're at the retreat, right? Shameless plug for our retreats.
Elevate.
Where I talk about if you understand your purpose, your past will make sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a really high level of acceptance to go, there was purpose in my son's death.
Yeah.
But the purpose was for me. His purpose
And not just
was to
for me.
Yeah. His purpose was to create what he created.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like how Dr. Miles Monroe says, the goal is not to die old. The goal is to die empty.
Mm. Yeah.
Right? Jesus was complete at
Yeah.
33.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Martin Luther King was complete at what? 32, 33.
Wow. I didn't
Somewhere
realize
he was
that young.
in his 30s.
Yeah.
Right? So it takes a high level of conscious awareness and acceptance and degree of understanding and willingness to surrender to go, my son was complete
Yeah.
at 18.
Yeah.
And now what I'm supposed to do with that is going to end the suffering for millions of others.
Yeah.
Like that creates, for me, if I were to experience that, and God knows I hope I never have to experience that.
Yeah, I hope nobody
Right.
does.
But that level of peace that also comes with that. Because, you know, for those of you that are listening, it's something you really need to understand. Peace comes from swallowing really big, hard pills to swallow.
Yeah.
Because the ego doesn't want to swallow it.
Yeah.
The ego wants to take it personal. But the peace comes from, especially when I'm talking to clients or I'm dealing with folks who've been, they experience horrible tragedies. And I tell them, I ask them, do you want peace? And they go, yes. And then I give them a really big, hard pill to swallow. An understanding that transcends their level of logic in the moment.
Yeah, it always does. Yeah.
But when and then I'm like, here's a really big glass of water. But I promise you, if you swallow this pill, it will alleviate all of your suffering. And every single time. And I love, it goes back to what that thing that I read earlier was about the commitment to being right.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This wasn't supposed to go this way. You're going to create your own suffering.
Oh, for sure. And people are creating
He
that
wasn't supposed to
narrative.
die yet.
Right.
That's going to create your
Yep.
suffering.
Yep.
This shouldn't have happened at this moment in time in my life.
Right.
That's going to create your own suffering.
Right.
When you are committed to being right about your perspective,
Oh, for sure.
you are literally creating the suffering that
Yeah.
you are experiencing. And it's not until you surrender your perspective
Mm-hmm.
that you will experience any level of healing and peace.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think, again, it's important that people are aware that it doesn't mean that the sadness or the loss is absolved.
Right.
I live with that sadness now, and I'm at peace with knowing that might never dissipate. And
So
it's okay.
I just
I'm
wanted
at peace with that.
the distinction right there is, how can I be healed and still have the sadness,
Mhm.
right? Because sadness is very different than anger. It's very different than guilt to me. It's
Sure.
different than
Yeah, it's-
sadness is, because Sadness is a despondency. It's a this is not in my control
Sure.
type of feeling, right?
And it's a
But-
human emotion,
Yeah,
right? It's
for sure.
It's okay.
But the part that I want to pull out of that is I can have peace and still experience the sadness because all the
Sure.
peace is acceptance.
Sure. And
I have fully accepted.
you could take that even a step further and say that you can have peace and experience the whole myriad of the human emotional experience, right? I can still experience anger and be at peace. Now, some people might go, wait, what?
Yeah, I'm sitting here
That's-
going, okay, what?
That's an emotional response to something. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
I can experience love and peace. Well, those seem more synonymous or more harmonious frames of existence, or consciousness. The emotion of love and having this peace. I can be any of the emotions and still have peace. I think we start to lose peace when we start to allow the emotions to take over and be the drivers. Like, I think the richness of our human experience is the spice of our emotions that we get to experience.
And I want to just pull out because that's a really, really great distinction, and the understanding that thoughts create emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So I can have a thought that can create. I'm at peace, but then have a thought that makes me angry, that creates anger.
Mm-hmm.
Have a thought that then creates guilt. I have a thought that then creates hurt. Right.
Sure.
So I get that. 100% get that. What would you say to someone right now listening to this and just can't seem to bring themselves around to the idea of creating peace for themselves in the midst of their loss? They're angry. They're pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
They're hurt.
Mm-hmm.
They are sad. They are desperate. And in some ways feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
As we wrap this episode up, because this has been a powerful, powerful episode, and I cannot wait for this documentary to come out, what would you say to that person? What do you want them to leave with?
I would say it doesn't have to be that way. And I would point out that they have a choice. They are choosing, and it might be hard to hear in the amplification of the emotion. I get it.
All right, because they're triggered right now.
I get it.
Talk directly to them.
I get it. But it is a choice. It's 100% a choice to stay in the guilt, the depression, the sadness. Like, I allow myself to experience that. I allow myself to experience the sadness. And there are days where it's a depressed day. I don't allow myself to stay there. And it's a choice. And I choose to get up, and I choose to do the work, and I choose to show up, and I choose to have a different experience. We're creating that narrative. Whether we're aware of it or not is another matter. It takes work to become aware. As you described, the thoughts that create our emotions and our feelings. It takes an extreme amount of awareness to identify the thoughts. And some studies are saying that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. Some upwards of 90,000, depending on who you ask. And 70% of which are the same from the day before.
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that we have control over is making that choice. And you get to choose. You get to choose whether you stay angry or you stay sad or you get resolved. I had to choose. I had to choose to surrender. And it took me 3 days. I had the awareness of what it took, and I was willing to do the work. And it's a choice. It's not an oversimplification to say that it's a choice. And some people go, "Oh, that is." I get it. In the space of charged emotion, our rational mind becomes irrational, and we don't see the way out. We don't see that it's a choice. It's just, it is what it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's also a choice. Allowing that thought to become a narrative, to become a belief, is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a degree of a high level of awareness to recognize that and to undo that. So be willing to do the work, make the choice to not stay in there. And I think another important component to that is that you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are people that have gone through it that are willing to support. There are people, surround yourself with a community of people that are willing to lift up your arms and walk side by side with you through that thing.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
And I would just say, there's purpose in this pain.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do exactly what the professor of possibility just explained, you'll move past the pain and get to the purpose and see what's possible. And then you'll be able to magnify that loss in a way that will shine so much light and brightness onto the world that you'll end up in a state of gratitude
Mm-hmm.
for having been a part
Yeah.
of the miracle that is being created through you and the one you lost. We love you. Thank you for spending another wonderful Sunday with us. We will gladly take all of your comments and questions and everything else that you may want to share. If you come for us, though, just know that you should try Jesus and not us, because we fight. I'm just playing. That's just completely.
Like where's he going with that? Like, what?
Family, you know that we like to have a good time here and want to make sure that you end on a laugh.
Yeah.
Because life is great.
Yeah.
Life is amazing.
Yeah.
And through all the ups and downs and everything else, that's what makes life so awesome. And that's one of those big pills that you have to swallow, or do encourage you to swallow. Yeah. But here's a big glass of water, because if you do, you will experience self-mastery and a level of love and joy for everything that happens in our lifetime that other people will grow envious of. And so, any last words?
Nope. It's been good chilling with your coach, Steve. Ugh, what happened there?
Oh, God. How does this happen at the end of every episode? We're done. We're done.
Like, no. It's been fun chilling with you. Now you got the microphone in my camera. It's been fun chilling with all you all. And your coach, Steve Pickett.
We have got to find a way to end these episodes. Like,